Good evening, all. Welcome to Conversations That Count. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am Shriley Kapale, Fairfax GOP Vice Chair of Strategy and Community Engagement. Our goal through this program, Conversations That Count, is to bring in candidates and community leaders and influencers to have thought-provoking conversations and perspectives on key issues facing our communities and nation, with a goal to build next generation of conservative influencers and leaders. This week, I have invited Steven Sutton. Mr. Sutton joined the Leadership Institute 14 years ago as Vice President for Programs, where he restructured Leadership Institute 40+ training programs, starting from political grassroots to student groups on college campuses. Steve now serves as LI's first Senior Vice President, where he focuses on training and mentoring the next generation of conservative leaders. Prior to joining Leadership Institute, Steve was the Chief of Staff in the House of Representatives for more than 14 years. He became a startup specialist as he set up the congressional offices for 4 different incoming freshman candidates. Steve is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy and has a bachelor's of degree in mechanical engineer. You will be very thankful that we are having this conversation, especially if you're interested in learning more about how to become a better conservative leader or how to learn about campaigns, or if you want to run in the future. Steve, welcome to Conversations That Count.
Thank you, Sheree. It's great to be with you.
Great to be with you, Steve. I know I spoke to you for a few minutes before the show started, and I'm already excited that you come with wealth of knowledge. So, Steve, you have over 30+ years of political experience on both conservative campaigns and non-for-profit organizations. How has politics evolved over time?
It's a great question, and I'm glad that you asked how has politics evolved, because I think on our side, people tend to come into public policy through policy because we're motivated by issues, and the issues are what matters, whatever issue it might be. The education, fiscal policy, international relations, and that's what motivates us to get involved. And sometimes we don't pay attention to the politics rather than the policy, and those are separate. I think that we have come a long way in the political side, particularly where we understand the importance of the politics. We think that as long as we're right on policy, we're going to win, because who could disagree with the policy that we think? That's not the way it works. The politics have to be right, and you need to look at things politically, first of all, to win election, but then also to get things done. And so I think we've come a long way in the last 20, 30 years, building conservative, Republican infrastructure so that the politics can match the policy. And that's why we've been more successful recently in the last 20 or 30 years compared to the previous, when Republicans, for example, for 40 years, they were in the minority in the House of Representatives. That's changed, and that's a good thing. And I think it's going to change very big, in a big way, this November and in 2024 as well.
Steve, I'm super excited about what you just said about midterm elections. We'll talk more as we go along. So, Steve, you helped each congressman get reelected too. You directed their campaign strategies, messages, and voter contact programs. And it's my understanding that you manage numerous political campaigns from city council to US Congress, specializing in challenger campaigns. I guess one of the questions that I want to ask is, as we go along the conversations, we'll talk a lot about candidates that are just going to run, right? New candidates. But what are the unique challenges you face when you are working with congressmen or even city council members, for that matter, while running for the re-election campaign? Are there different challenges?
There are. When I became the chief of staff to the 4 different members, I was always coming in from the outside. I had not worked on their campaign. They were looking for a chief of staff when they came to Washington. So I didn't have the benefit of knowing the campaign that they ran, knowing the districts, knowing the people, and it can be difficult when a person's been elected to convince them they should do things a little differently because they just got elected. So they're very smart. They've been successful, and they got elected without you. So what do they need you for? They just want you to manage the office. Well, sometimes they are elected in a tidal wave election. And as we all know from the tides, this is my Naval Academy and Navy background speaking, what the tide washes in, the tide will also wash out. So you have to be careful if you win in a wave election, that wave can sweep you out to sea when the pendulum swings, to mix the metaphor. So there's a challenge there, and you just have to build up some credibility so that they will listen to you. That's why I liked working on challenger campaigns when I was working on campaigns more than working for congressmen, because in challenger campaigns, they seem to be more open to the ideas. Incumbent campaigns, they tend to be a little more entrenched, and it's more difficult. My attitude was, if you're an incumbent and you need help, maybe I can't help you.
Yeah, no, Steve, I think that is the right attitude, right? I think coming from a naval background, you probably have great organizational leadership where you're saying that running is one thing, winning is one thing, but getting re-elected is also a challenge. And one of the reasons I ask is, we want to make sure we hold on to our candidates that actually won. We want them to continue to win. Otherwise, we're going to start from scratch again. So it's always fascinating to know what their culture and what their mentality is. You never want to be overconfident.
And I don't want to suggest that you should do whatever it takes to get reelected, because that's the only thing that's important. And you should even compromise your principles to do so. That's not what I'm suggesting. And sometimes that's what people hear, but that's not what I mean at all. A quick example, the first member of Congress I worked for was the only member in New England. This is back when they had Republicans in Massachusetts, but he was the only member of Congress from either party in New England to vote against the assault weapons ban. That was back, we got him reelected. That was not popular. So you could stand up for principle and still get elected, but you have to understand the politics that's going on and how to deal with the way you vote. Each member, all four, I told them, I'm never going to tell you to vote yes or no on anything. I'm not even going to recommend it. I'm going to say, if you vote yes, these are the landmines potentially. If you vote no, these are the, and as chief of staff, we'll handle it politically, but just so the member knows that if it's a tough vote, why it's a tough vote. And then they vote their conscience, and we live with that. That's fine.
It's really nice to know what is the chief of staff job description is, right? I almost thought chief of staff means you're managing his staff, but not advising. It's good to know that there is that a higher level of responsibility of advising on bills. So Steve, in your past career, it looks like you also advised on everything from fundraising to campaign leadership to conservatives who are actually not involved in political process, in the sense who are planning to run, but really not involved yet. So when you're coaching these, I call them as newbies, conservatives, what is the common theme that you found that you wish they should have known this? I mean, sometimes I work as a director in my organization. There are many times where I'm like, I assumed you knew this, but never make those assumptions. So what is the common thing that you find?
Well, with people who are thinking of running for office, they sometimes, I did not understand politics until I started getting involved in it, because you think that you make a speech and the best ideas win, and it's really not like that. There are multiple sides to every issue, and there's an old expression: conservatives win every debate and lose every election. And so I think it's important to get elected, and there are techniques and tactics to do that without compromising principle. And it's just learning those things and understanding that there's something to that. Many candidates are very successful in their private lives, and they think because of that, they're going to be a successful candidate. Well, they need advisors. They need people who have gone through it and understand. And one of the things that they really need is they need a community. They need to be well known in the community. there are two types of candidates. There are candidates who run to be somebody, and then there are candidates who run to do something. And the voters can tell very quickly, well, if you want to convince people that you are running to do something, you should have done something. So we encourage people to get involved in their community, and it doesn't have to be politically. One of my favorite candidates in Nashville, Tennessee, who I helped, he has two daughters, and when they were old enough, they wanted to play basketball in an organized basketball league, but the boys' league would not let them play in the boys' league. So this person started a girls' basketball league. Now, that's not political. That's not blockading an abortion clinic or something. It's just getting involved in the community. When he decided to run many years later, he had dozens of parents who adored him, and they helped him, not because of his position on certain policy, but because they knew him. They knew him to be a hardworking, honest person who put his community first and his family first. And that's the type of person they wanted representing them. And so those make the best candidates, people involved in the community. And we have a school at the Leadership Institute, the Future Candidate School, where we talk about that over a 4-day period, how you get involved in the community, raise money for charities and other organizations, because those people will become your fundraisers when you run, and just how to do that, how to get involved in the community so that you will be a strong candidate should you decide to run.
Absolutely. I think you said it so very well. Candidates that run to do something or to get somewhere. I think that's one thing that I keep telling the candidates, saying that make a name for yourself. It can be anything. I mean, be part of some community services board, I mean, Rotary Club, whatever your passion is, as long as you are well known in community in some way based on your philosophy, not necessarily political philosophy. So now that's amazing. So Steve, I mean, if you kind of look around, 2021 was the year when the encroachment of divisive left-wing ideology into every aspect of American society, even into the classroom of our children. I'm a mom. My daughter goes to FCPS, so I've seen it firsthand. Unfortunately, many school boards are now used as social engineering tools instead of focusing on preparing our children for higher education and the skilled workforce. So does Leadership Institute do any training so parents can indeed start running for the school boards? I think that's going to be a critical thing in 2023.
As a matter of fact, that's one of the new schools we've added in the last year or so, and that's a school board candidate training school. And because we developed it during COVID, we actually put the entire school online. I think there's 21 lectures. So if somebody was interested, they could go to leadershipinstitute.org, our website, and they could view any of those 21 lectures or all of those 21 lectures, I think free of charge. But if there's a cost, it would be nominal. But I don't know that there's a cost because we decided to put that entire school online because it was during COVID.
Okay, that's very, very good to know. I hope that there are several school board members that I know, or several parents or moms that I know are planning to run. Hopefully they'll take advantage of it.
And we work closely with Moms for, there are many organizations, but Moms for Liberty is one of the largest now. And they just had their convention or conference in Florida. And we did the training at that conference. So we work very close with them and other groups. And if someone has a group and they want us to do training for them, they should contact us.
Yeah. So Steve, how many people do you expect? Because I know that as I said, I'm a grassroots organizer for Fairfax GOP. I do a lot of work with 11 congressional districts. So in case we decide to go down that path, what is the number that you're looking for?
In what way? How many people we
how many
train
people?
somebody?
Yes.
Well, the closer it is to LI, the smaller the, if you were living in Seattle, Washington, the minimum might be higher because we have to fly trainers out to you. If it's doing something in Fairfax, Virginia, well, the Leadership Institute's headquarters is in Arlington, Virginia. So that would be much easier with probably a lower threshold. I've done trainings with as few as 10 to 15 people. I'm now living full-time in South Carolina. And so I do trainings on the weekend for small groups, that I can drive to from my home in South Carolina. So um, it just depends on what the resources are and what the availability is and how busy we get.
Got
So
it.
if you're
Yeah, go ahead.
interested, you should call someone at the Leadership Institute. That would be the grassroots department, and ask for Robert Arnakis. But anyone could take the call and find out what you're interested in doing. Is it a 3-hour school or is it a 2-day school? I mean, those are the types of things that would make a difference in the size and how many people we would train.
Steve, as you know, next year is a big year for us. We have about 52 positions open that we will have to recruit candidates and fill. So we'll definitely kind of reach out to you. So Steve, we just talked about how school boards around the country are captured by the left. This includes actually large urban districts where leftists are expected to control school politics or local politics, as well as actually more suburban areas where the nonpartisan nature of school board election leads actually many conservative voters. And I've been on the receiving end of this to cast ballots for leftist candidates because they call it as nonpartisan. They say things right. And then once they get into the board, then all hell breaks loose. So that perplexes me that even conservative voters in suburban areas goes and votes for leftist candidates thinking that it's a nonpartisan. So has the Leadership Institute discussed this, and should the messaging be taught differently to capture these voters' attention so they know what they're getting into?
Yes, when we do our campaign schools, this question comes up in every school. So we address it and we talk through that. I don't like this answer for most questions, but it depends. There are many school board elections around the country that are partisan. And so you can vote for the Republican or Democrat. In South Carolina and in many other states, they are nonpartisan. And what we're seeing, and this goes to your very first question, what's the state of affairs in the conservative community now? It's gotten so much better. And so in the nonpartisan races, we're seeing more and more Republican Party clubs endorsing candidates, even in nonpartisan races. In fact, I'm working with a few people here who want to know how to do that. So I'm meeting with them and coming up with ways to do that. The other way would be to have a conservative organization, not the party. There are still many people in the party reluctant to endorse in nonpartisan races because they're nonpartisan. And so rather than trying to convince them otherwise, just form a conservative group. And that's where Moms for Liberty and other groups like that are coming into, or a pro-parent group. It doesn't have to be conservative. I equate those two together though. And they can endorse. And so if you're running and you get endorsed by a third party, it's telling voters, because everyone's going to sound like a conservative this year. Everyone. The farthest leftist is going to talk about how pro-parent they are, and we're not teaching CRT in the schools, and they're going to sound like a conservative because they're not stupid. They know if they actually campaign truthfully, they're going to lose. And so it takes a third party to step in and say, here's our endorsed candidates. And then the candidates can use those endorsements very effectively. And I think we're seeing that on a very large scale this year. And I just think there are going to be many, many, many victories that are going to surprise a lot of people in November, even in nonpartisan races.
Absolutely. Steve, all of a sudden being conservative has become cool with all the chaos Biden has created. So Steve, let me talk about your expertise. I mean, you raise funds. I mean, as a LI's Vice President for Development, you increased revenue from $7 million per year to $24 million in a span of a decade, which I think is kind of amazing. I have run for office. I know one of my biggest challenge was raising funds. I think that is the biggest challenge for most candidates. I can't imagine one candidate ever telling me that, oh yeah, don't worry about that, I got it. So of course, raising candidates funds as a candidate is different from increasing the revenue, but on the same token, I thought you ought to have some similar skills. So what do you think? What is the best tip that you can give for our candidates listening to the show?
Well, I really enjoy teaching people how to raise money because I came to LI 15 years ago as vice president for programs. And about a year or so after I was reorganizing a lot of the programs, our president, Morton Blackwell, asked me to become vice president for development. And as I like to tell the story, it's kind of funny. Morton asked me, and I said, no, thank you, because that's not my background. My background was campaigns and grassroots organizing and politics. So a month later, he asked me a second time, and I said, hell no, thank you. And then about a month later, he asked me a third time, and my wife explained to me, he's a Southern gentleman from Louisiana. This is his way of telling you. And so I accepted, and but I had to learn how to do it because it wasn't my background. I knew a little bit about fundraising, but not nonprofit fundraising. So it took me some time to learn it. So now I love to teach it because I found that the perceptions I had were wrong. Everyone dreads raising money. They hate to ask for money. Well, if that's the case, you're probably doing it wrong, quite frankly. And so there are things you can learn how to do it. I loved raising money until last year when Morton made me the senior vice president. So now I'm not doing it anymore. But and as you said, we went from 7 million to 24 million. Actually, 24 million in 2020. Last year we raised 29 million. And I think we're going to break 30 million this year. So there are techniques to do it. But again, it's related to what we talked about earlier, building a community of people. And if you don't know anyone, I had a call from a gentleman, I'm thinking of running for office, but I don't know anyone and I don't have any money. What do I do? And I said, you should not run for office. There's no solution to that. You need a good name in the community. And if you have that, you'll be able to raise money. Because the people who want to see you elected will raise money for you. You'll have to train them how to do it. But there are techniques, and again, we teach that in our fundraising schools, of how to do that. And there are methods, and they work.
Absolutely, Steve. I think you said it right. I mean, you were very candid in saying, if you don't know anyone, then probably you should first get to know your community, its issues, work for the community, serve the community, and then run. Then you have people there. But Steve, let me ask you something. Do you divide this training based on small and large donors? The reason I ask is, as a unit, I mean, our unit is no different. All the units, I think we all kind of struggle to raise this, and we try to understand, should we spend our time on small donors? Should we spend our time on large donors? Is there a different tactic that gets deployed to grab the attention of large donors? Or have folks make recurrent donation? How do you do that?
Well, it's a great question because it strikes at the heart of what you should be doing. You should prioritize your time. You only have so much time. And so you need to prioritize your time with the people with the greatest potential. Now, whether those are large donors or small, we could talk about, but every organization should determine what a major donor is. And that dollar amount's different for different organizations. When I first started fundraising for Leadership Institute, a major donor was anyone who gave us $1,000 or more. Now it's $10,000 or more because we've grown so much. But for your organization, a small organization, it might be $500. And so you do want to treat them differently, develop a relationship with them, because if someone can give you 500, they can give you another 500, and they could probably give you 2,000 or 3,000, and they're not stretched usually. Now, that said, you still have to pay attention to the small donors because that's where your big donors come from. I can't tell you how many times someone started donating to Leadership Institute through direct mail, which does still work, and they started donating at $100 or less. And now those are our major donors because we have cultivated the relationship and built the relationship over time. And what you can focus on is people will upgrade through the mail slowly over time. You want to upgrade them more quickly by meeting with them, but you have to prioritize. And so there's an important part of researching your small donors and seeing who has the ability to donate more. We get $50 donors from people who we find out are multimillionaires because they're testing you. They're not going to send you, they don't send you $100,000 in the envelope the first time they get a letter from you. They're kind of kicking the tires on the car and they're trying to they're testing you. How will I be treated? Is this organization legit? Do they have successes? Am I making a difference? Does my support matter? And those are the things you have to convey in your literature, in your discussions. And so there are techniques to doing that. We have a 4-day fundraising school, and we focus on that. It's a great school. People should, if they're professional fundraisers or thinking of doing more in fundraising, they should take that school. And we go into great detail on doing donor events, pros and cons, direct mail, pros and cons. The best and the fastest way to raise money is one-on-one. You know, there's an old joke that the best fundraiser is the $1 million per ticket fundraiser, because you only need to sell one ticket. Well, it's the same thing. If you're meeting with someone, you can raise a lot of money quickly with one-on-one meetings, but you need the 2 A's. You need, they have to show affluence, but they also have to show affinity for your organization. So a list of the top 50 richest people does you no good because there's no affinity for your organization. So that's why your best donors come from your current donors. So look at your current donor base and see who has the affinity for your organization, if they've been donating for multiple years. If they've donated more than once a year, that's a good indicator. So more than once a year for many years, no matter what the amount is, and research those donors and try to get meetings with them. And you'll be surprised how quickly, if you have a donor base, you'll be surprised how quickly you'll raise more money.
Steve, what pearls of wisdom? I mean, I think the more I hear, the more I think I'll probably step in for the 4-day fundraising school for sure this year or next year.
Great.
So Steve, before I invite anyone to Conversations That Count, I actually go in and listen to their videos because I want to make sure I know what content they talk about and so on and so forth. One of the videos that I watched, I was truly impressed when you spoke about 4 P's of excellence. I'm not sure if you remember that at all, but I would love, if you do remember, I would love for you to elaborate on that. I think our viewers, audience, whoever listened to this will benefit from that.
Oh, terrific. Well, it's something that I started talking to the interns when I was vice president for programs at LI. The interns were one of the programs. And I thought, I think there's some foundational education that they need to get better on. So I developed the 4 P's of excellence, and they are philosophical, and yes, that begins with a P, philosophical, policy, politics, and personal. And just very quickly, I found that many people who came to LI, they were good on issues, but they didn't understand why. So why are you pro-life? Why are you pro-gun? And after 1 or 2 questions, they kind of fell apart and they really couldn't answer that. And often it was, well, my parents were conservative, so I grew up that way. And I'm not sure that's enough. So I think you need to study the philosophy of conservatism. Why are you conservative? It's very important. And that involves a little bit of history, and it depends on how far back you want to go. If you want to go back to the founders and others, great thinkers from Great Britain in the 1700s, and Adam Smith, and all that, or just to Buckley and Russell Kirk. But there needs to be a better understanding philosophically. Second, policy. It's a little different. Policy is current policy. I would often ask interns, what's your most important issue? And then I would say, okay, tell me 2 or 3 things about that issue right now. What's happening with that issue? And they couldn't tell me. I'm pro-life, but they couldn't tell me what what are the bills that are the left's trying to push? What's going on now? At the time, it was partial birth abortion, and they didn't really know. They didn't even know what that was, and they're just pro-life. Not good enough. So if it's your most important issue, particularly, you should know a little bit more about it. So they need to study a little more about the policy. The 3rd P is politics, and we've already talked about that briefly. The politics and the policy have to match up in order for anything to get passed legislatively. And they are different and they are distinct. Incoming freshman members of Congress are told in orientation, you can do policy or you can do politics, but you can't
Wow.
do both. And they think they can because they're geniuses. They just got elected to Congress. But they're diametrically opposed. If you're going to be in the Freedom Caucus and you're going to be doing politics, you may not get on the A committees to do policy because leadership may not trust you. Conversely, if you're doing policy, well, you may have to vote for some bills that you politically might you might not want to. So and that's a quick expression of that. But the politics have to match, and you'll make yourself a much better and more valuable staffer if you do policy and politics, if you understand the nexus between the two. I had a long discussion with an intern who was applying to be a legislative assistant to a US senator. And I explained to him in much more detail over about an hour, the politics part of being a legislative assistant. He had his interview and he got the job. And he said, that's what everyone else came in and they were a policy expert, but nobody had the political understanding that he now had. And so they hired him. And it makes a difference. I was a political chief of staff as opposed to a policy chief of staff. And I think we need more of that. And that's why Leadership Institute training is so important. And then the fourth and final P is personal. When we're running campaigns, you got to take care of your health. If you're a candidate or working on a campaign, they are grinding and you do them cycle after cycle. It takes a toll. You got to take care of your health. You have to take care of your retirement. Campaigns do not help you contribute to an IRA. There's no matching retirement plan. I know several political consultants who, after a career as a political consultant, they have zero saved for retirement. And that's not good. So you've got to take care of the personal and then also family. That's part of personal. Being in politics can be very grueling on the family, just like being in the Navy was tough on the family. And so you've got to pay attention to the personal. And sometimes, particularly young people, they poo-poo that, but it's something. So those are the 4 Ps of excellence.
Excellent, Steve. That's pretty impressive. I hope more people get to kind of listen to that and take it into heart. There's a very good reason I have a lot of respect for what the Leadership Institute does, thanks to leaders like you. I personally think it is a very fine organization that exists to help conservative advance their personal and professional goals. You just elaborated on that. I mean, if I could go to the extent to say it's truly the human resource department for the movement that we are trying to do as grassroots conservatives. But Steve, my question is, are there any other organization within the conservative world that do the similar work? What about something like PragerU? Do they do the similar work, or is that completely a different organization?
I'm only familiar with the videos they do, the YouTube videos, which are just outstanding. And I think that's the way they advance conservatism. But it's persuasion conservatism, which is not what LI does. We train people already conservative how to be more effective persuading others. Many organizations have begun to do training. I think LI was the first, founded in 1979 with 1 school. And we've grown, but other organizations, often what they'll do is they'll bring us in to do the training, but when they get large enough, they'll start doing it themselves. And so many groups now are doing training, but it's a big country with a lot of demand. So quite frankly, the more the merrier. Good example is Turning Point. Charlie Kirk is LI trained. And when he started Turning Point, he brought Leadership Institute in to do training at his conferences. But I understand now they've grown so large, they've decided to start a training arm of what they do, which is terrific because they've grown so large, they have a real demand for training, and now they're going to start doing that themselves. But there are many groups now that have an element of training to them, and that's all to the good.
Yeah, that's very good. As long as the originality doesn't go. I mean, Martin Blackwell's vision was amazing. As long as people stick to the quality, right? I think that's all it is. So, Steve, many people seem to be totally disillusioned with the country's current political climate, and I don't blame people at all. What would you say to the candidates to encourage them to get involved? Let's talk even about 11th Congressional District or Fairfax GOP, or Fairfax County for that matter. We have 1.2 million people. We, time and time again, after election cycle, we end up being, no matter how much we try, I've been in the community trying to do minority engagement, regardless of what we do, we still turn out to be 32%, 34%. So what would you say to these people that want to run but are discouraged, but look at the country's current political climate and are like, I wish I could do something? How do you motivate them to get involved?
That's a great question because it's related to running to do something or running to be somebody. So if you're running to do something, you can run for office, not win, and still have a huge impact. There's no better way to organize people than running for office, because people understand that. They understand volunteering, what to do, going door to door, making phone calls, donating, voting, getting people organized. It's really community organizing, but with a candidate and a campaign as a structure to do it. So there's no better way to, if there was no political campaign, try organizing hundreds or thousands of people. It's more difficult. So to run to, yes, you want to win, but if you don't win, keeping the organization intact for a purpose after the election is very important. Also, I believe that we should run people everywhere because of that organizational component. And so when the campaign is over, if you got 33%, well, that's terrific. You try to identify that 33%, and you know who your volunteers are, you know who your donors are. When Oliver North ran for the US Senate, he didn't win, but he created an enormous political action committee with the people that had donated to him for the campaign and said, the fight is not over. The war continues. We lost this battle, but we're going to continue. And he encouraged people to donate to his political action committee and remained active for decades later. For all I know, it's still going on, quite frankly, his PAC. And so if you give people a things to do, projects and a vision, and keep them engaged and active in other ways, we need people to show up at school board meetings. We need people to monitor how Republicans as well as Democrats. We need an organization to hold their feet to the fire. We need people to circulate petitions on specific issues. There's so many things that can be done after an election is over, but too often the election is over, that's the end. We collect the yard signs. At best, they end up in someone's garage, and the organization falls apart. And in 2 years, the next person is starting from scratch. And so we need to avoid that. So I think that happened in 2010 after the Tea Parties, won a huge victory. The left was destroyed after 2010 in that election. Look where we are 12 years later. It's amazing because we lost track. We took our eye off the prize. And I'm hoping, it's rare you get another chance so soon. But I think that 22 and 24 are going to be equally strong for conservatives. And hopefully we've learned a lesson to stay involved, stay engaged after the elections are over, and hold the people we elected accountable and move on from there and continue. The left does that. The left stays engaged.
Absolutely.
We're productive people, and we're busy people, and we elect good people, and we assume they're going to do the right thing, and we go back to our lives, and then it falls apart. Let's not let that happen again.
I think we very soon take our eyes off the prize and we start from scratch again. I think you got that right. So very wise thoughts. So Steve, do you guys do training for both rural and urban population? I'm always concerned that there is lack of rural voters turnout when you know they all share our values. So do you go around there and do that too? Do trainings?
We do. Again, it depends on how many and how far and how many people. But the rural communities are very motivated. So when we do a training in a so-called rural area, we'll get good attendance. Most of our trainings tend to be kind of regional in nature, so we publicize it, or the hosting organization publicizes it amongst their membership. And so we get pretty good turnouts, particularly now. There's no shortage of activists. Our mission is to increase the number and effectiveness of conservative students, activists, and leaders. Well, the Biden administration has taken care of half of our mission, increasing the number. The numbers are there. Now we just have to train them what to do. And so we're very active. This weekend, we're doing a training in Boise, Idaho, for example. And that's a city, but still, it's a smaller place. We traveled all over the country and even internationally doing trainings. And so it's just a question of what people want to do and what the resources are, how many people we can train at a time. And we just did a youth leadership school that had almost 300 students, a record number just earlier this month in July. And but we do youth leadership workshops on college campuses for 10 people, for 10 students on that campus if they want us to. Of course, that's a 3-hour training. The youth leadership school is a full weekend. So but we'll work with people. Will call us, give us a call, give me a call if people want to, and we'll work with them and figure out what makes the most sense that we can do cost effectively. And so I'll talk with people one-on-one if they want to. You know, they can call me and I'll teach you how to raise money, Shri, and give you an hour. You know, and you should still come to the school. But if people have questions, there's so much that we have to offer, so many resources, the right people to talk to, and we'll get people's questions answered.
Steve, I'm not sure if I can afford you one-on-one, but I'll come to the group lessons for sure.
It's free.
Yeah, thank you.
I am paid by the Leadership Institute. There are no fees.
We appreciate that very much.
The cost of the schools is usually very nominal. It's to pay for the lunch usually, and you can call me anytime, and I might be worth what you pay, but you're paying zero.
Steve, that's very, very kind of you. I mean, you are absolutely right. Fee for these trainings are low cost or no cost sometimes. I mean, I have to thank your generous donor base you have for Leadership Institute, that you actually cultivated the relationship and built the donor base. Steve, are there any religious institutions?
If I can just add, I just spoke to a group on Monday, and they sent me a $250 as a thank you. And I just called them up and said, I can't, I'm not going to take that. We raised a lot of money last year than you did, your organization. We raised $29 million last year. So our donors pay for the training and for the services that we provide. So I'm giving that check back, and they were very happy, and it was very nice of them to do it, but very unnecessary.
Wow. Wow. So what about religious institutions, Steve? I mean, there is a lot of disgruntlement among religious institutions that the country is kind of going to become one of those places with no religion, or there is really no religious liberty anymore. So have you had these religious institutions reach out to you in order to partner so you can provide training to them as well?
Yes. In fact, the group that I mentioned just is a religiously oriented, family-oriented organization in South Carolina that wanted me to speak to their interns about opportunities to get them more involved. And so absolutely, we just hired for our campus groups, we just hired a Christian staffer, for Christian groups on campuses, which we've never had before. So we're seeing a lot of that. Because people realize they need to get involved.
Absolutely.
Or they're going to be in trouble. And so,
Steve, as you know, I said this is Fairfax County, right? Fairfax County, as you might realize, minorities and immigrants are over 50%. And sometimes the messaging has to be a little different, although all our values are the same. Me being very engaged in minority communities, I'm always concerned that traditional education might not really, they can connect the dots, let me put it that way. So I have two-part question. So if you're teaching for those kind of communities, is your messaging any different? Or are there any even outreach activities that you do so these folks can take classes and trainings? Because I think there is issues that they don't really come out and take these classes. And second thing is messaging should be slightly different. How you say it should be different, because values are the same, but they won't connect the dots between conservatism and liberalism.
Great question. And we do many hours of message and communications training in our campaign management school. And we go through that. It's as you said, it is similar, but it's different. And you have to work through that. And each community, it's slightly different. But as a general rule, though, the messaging is for the most part the same. A good example, Myra Flores, who just won that seat in Texas, she is LI trained. She attended 2 trainings in Texas. We did grassroots training in Texas. We're very active there. And I think she went to her first LI training in 2019. And then she took another one a year or so ago before she ran for Congress. And she learned in part some of the messaging. And now her message was different, but how to do it, she learned. And her message on her yard signs, she had 3 words in addition to her name, which I thought was brilliant. What are the 3 most important things in the Hispanic community? And they were on her yard sign: God, family, and country. That's pretty good.
Yes.
And she was elected, in this huge upset, which I think is indicative of many victories we'll have later this year. So I've been surprised it's taken so long for some minority communities to embrace conservatism and republicanism, but I think that's happening. Usually you would see it gradually occur over several election cycles, but it's happening in one cycle now. People have seen, the left has exposed themselves for who they are, and parents and people who love country and God are realizing how their policies will destroy our families, our communities, and our country. And it's that serious. And they realize that now. So that's why I think there's going to be a huge victory with a huge coalition that we have never seen before. And but we still have to do outreach, and we are, and people are showing up. So that's
great to know, Steve. I mean, I think that's what will be the winning formula for us. We just really need to get them understand that we all value the same thing. Again, who can defeat the message of God, family, and country? I mean, what else is out there that is better than that? So, Steve,
and to the point, though, we teach that your message should contrast with the other side. And the fact that the other side now has a problem standing for God, family, and country, they can't say that because they don't believe it, and the policies undermine all 3. So they're in very big trouble because they've exposed themselves for who they are. Usually they lie better than they have, and they can't control their base anymore. So people are waking up to that, and I think because we treat everyone as Americans, that's what unites us. We're all Americans. I can't go to Mexico and be Mexican. I can't go to France and become French. But people from those countries can come here and embrace the Constitution and all of that that entails, and they can be American. And that's what unites us. And that's what the left doesn't understand and refuses to acknowledge. So as they separate people and divide people based on race and religion and sexual orientation, the more that they show the difference, diverse divides. That's the root of all 3 words. It is divisive or divisive, depending on how you pronounce it. But we're the uniters. And sometimes that gets lost, but I think people are coming to realize that now. And I think you're going to see a huge coalition that will destroy the left in this country and hopefully bury it for at least a generation, if not more.
Absolutely. Steve, I know you were talking about the campus reform. I know a lot of young people are getting exposed to left-wing bias on American campuses. So when you go to those campus reform sessions in colleges, how do you actually expose that? How do you expose this left-wing bias?
It's a great question. We have a network of campus correspondents throughout the country, and they're students on college campuses. And we've had over 100 recently per year, and they investigate the stories. They're the ones that share the stories with our campus reform staff. And I would say for every story we print, we don't print probably 2 stories. So they're well-researched, balanced, but they will expose the bias and indoctrination of the left on college campuses. The students, if your story's printed, I think you get a small stipend of $75. And we've had some students make thousands of dollars because they have a network of their high school friends that have gone to different colleges that are feeding them stories. And but they're heavily researched. And so that's how that network works. We wanted to take advantage of the unique network that we have of campus groups on college campuses. We have over 2,000 campus groups of conservative students on campus. So that's a network that's pretty strong. So how to maximize that? Well, let's ask them for information if they feel that there's bias or indoctrination going on their campus. And there's no shortage of that. We think we've pushed back pretty successfully. You don't see very many speakers being shouted down anymore because we had a specific project to deal with that. And the pushback was very strong on our side. And now those speakers are being allowed to speak. You don't see them being shut down as much.
That's very, very good to know, because I know I listened to Dinesh D'Souza quite a bit, and he was shut down multiple times in these college campuses. So Steve, I also see that Leadership Institute has several podcasts such as Tech Talk to Experts, Take on the Latest in Digital Technology, Learn Right for School Board Campus. I mean, I literally urge everyone to view them on Instagram TV and YouTube. I listen to them. I view them when I have a chance. You guys really are pushing out some cutting edge stuff out there. I can tell you that. So at the end, Steve, I think
if people want to learn how to do those, we do training on how to put those on and how to create the content.
Steve, I think we lost
and Steven Rowe, R-O-W-E, is director of our digital. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Or
now I can
you hear me?
Yes. Now I can hear you. Yes.
So Steven Rowe, R-O-W-E, he is the director of our digital training programs, and we teach how to do it. So the content is great. People should view it. But if you want to create your own content, you should come to some of the training and learn how to do it. We teach that too.
Absolutely. No, this is very informational. Steve, I think this is one of your quotes. You said democracy is not a spectator sport to be watched from sidelines. It is participatory and civil obligation to be involved at some level. And you also went on to say, we have ceded the battlefield to the left for too long. It is time to take it back. I thought that was just amazing. And you're living the life of it, in the sense you're not just passing out the statements and sitting back. You're right in the trenches, you're being an educator, you're being a leader, you're trying to help people where their most weaknesses is, which is fundraising. So I thank you. I thank you so much for not only joining us, but doing so much community service as such for conservative world. There are not many institutions as Leadership Institute, and please note that we appreciate the organization and we appreciate your leadership.
Thank you.
I thank you for joining us. This has been
only because of our donors. It's because of our donors and Morton Blackwell's leadership and vision. And he's just created a wonderful thing, and he's truly a living legend in my mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. We can't do any of these with low cost or no cost without those valuable donors that actually believe in the cause. This has been a wonderful conversation, Steve. I know we had little issues, I think minor issues for the reception, but overall I was able to hear. I hope our viewers were able to hear you. Your message was clear. I hope more people will take advantage of the Leadership Institute. I know I will for sure. It is an organization that is creating a strong foundation to next generation of conservative leaders. Anytime you are interested in knowing a little more about minority engagement, as you know, it's not a monolithic communities.
Right.
Please let us know. We are doing a lot of minority engagement, and we would love to partner with you.
Terrific. Well, call us anytime.
Thank you. Viewers, thank you all for joining us this evening on a Friday evening. Do want to let you know that next week on Saturday, July 30th at 6 p.m., we will have Reese Smith, who is a state chair of high school Republicans, young Republicans. We also will have as a panel Luke Swetnam. He's a vice chair, and Sam Widener. He's Northeast Regional Director for the high school Republicans. All three of them will work as a panel, will kind of come in as panelists, and we'll have a great session next week as well. Please share the video far and wide in conservative circles and even in independent circles. We really want to make sure we expand our tent, and we want as many people as possible to listen to this pulse of words of wisdom from Mr. Sutton. Please tune in and continue to support. Have a great evening. God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you.